So today we're going to be beginning our 4-lesson unit on ephemeral art. We'll be going over art history about ephemeral art, learning how to be involved in art criticism, talking about aesthetics, and actually producing ephemeral art. So go through this presentation, and you might have to click on this video to hear the audio with it, but as you complete this, make sure you have your worksheets on hand so you can thoroughly answer each question on the worksheet. You'll be turning these in at the end for a 50-point participation grade. So let's go ahead and get started. So what does ephemeral even mean? Something that's ephemeral might mean that it lasts a short time. So when we're talking about ephemeral art, what is ephemeral art? It might be a work of art that only occurs once. It might be a piece of art that is not meant to last on purpose. It might be made out of materials that are found in nature that decay naturally. It'll be about the passage of time, and it's not meant to be sold for any monetary value, and it's usually not meant to be hung on a gallery or museum wall in a traditional way. But now you might be thinking, where did ephemeral art begin? Or where did it begin? Or who was the first person to create it? Well, we know that many religions and cultures have included ephemeral art in their past. And two examples might be the Tibetan monks and the Navajo Native American tribes. With the Tibetan monks, if you look at the image on the right of the mandala, they create symbolic pictures out of colored sand, usually about the universe or about the earth. And after they're done creating the piece, they wipe it away. So it's ephemeral. It's not meant to last. With the Navajo Native Americans, they created symbolic sand paintings, also out of different colored sands. But these sands were made from different natural pigments from the earth. And these sand paintings were created during ceremonies to help honor the various gods of their culture and to help heal its people. At the end of the ceremony, they would wipe these sand paintings away to restore the natural pigments back to Mother Nature. But when we're talking about the ephemeral art movement, we want to go back to the 1960s and look at the Fluxus group. And this was a group of artists that were interested in creating art that existed outside of the gallery or outside of the museum. Works, again, weren't meant to be worth any money, and when they're creating different pieces of ephemeral art, one example were called happenings. And these were events that were considered to be artistic pieces that involved the audience. So they were sometimes considered as improvisation pieces. Each happening was different from the next because they might have differed by the audience participating or by the materials used. So that was what made them ephemeral. They can also be called performance art pieces, which is what they're most referred to. And this art movement expanded the definition of what art could be and what it could be in the future. There are many different kinds of ephemeral art categories that we'll talk about in the next slide. So the different types of ephemeral art, or the different categories, just to name a few, there's performance art, there's pieces created within nature, there's temporary installations, and others. When we look at performance art, a few artists to note are John Cage, Claes Oldenburg, Alan Caprow, Yves Klein, and the pair Christo and Jean-Claude. You might want to write these names down on your worksheet because when we get to the art history lesson, you will be involved in a research project and you'll be required to research an ephemeral artist. So these are just a few to keep in mind when you're researching. Other pieces that were created in nature, they were made out of the materials found within the location that they were made. So these are called site-specific pieces. It might also include land art, which were pieces of art that altered the land in some way, shape, or form, maybe with man-made materials or maybe with natural materials. With temporary installations, these could be found in the gallery and in the museum like before, but they could also be found within the community. Most of the time, they were in a public space where the public eye could see. And of course, there's many other categories that we don't have time to talk about. But can you think of any other types of ephemeral art? Any other kind of categories? Or have you seen an ephemeral art piece somewhere before? If you have, write down where it was located and what materials it was made out of. Whether it was site-specific or whether it was a piece of land art or maybe it was a piece of performance art. Now think, have you ever created your own ephemeral art piece? I know for me, I definitely have when I've played in the snow or when I've been on the beach. When I'm playing in the snow, I know when I was a kid, I used to make snow angels. And so obviously over time, that snow angel is going to melt away. So that's what makes it ephemeral. It's not meant to last. Also, when we're looking at playing on the beach, some kids like to make sandcastles. And so do adults. And if you make a sandcastle, eventually the tide is going to take the sandcastle away, or maybe someone will step on it, or a bird might jump on it, or somehow it's going to get ruined and restored back to nature. So that is another example of an ephemeral art piece that you may have created yourself. So go ahead and write those responses down on your worksheet. When we're talking about modern happenings, these are things that are occurring in our society today. They're not outdated like we think they are. 3 examples of modern happenings can be silent discos, flash mobs, and international group days. So silent discos are a group gathering, and if you look at this GIF right here below, it'll show you a little glimpse of what a silent disco might look like. And this is where individuals each get their own set of headphones, and each set of headphones is playing its own song. So everyone starts dancing, and little do they know, everyone is listening to a different song and doing a different type of dance. So if you're one of the viewers of this event, it's hilarious because everyone is in their own world doing their own thing, but it's looked at as a collective group. With flash mobs, this is a choreographed or usually a planned group event that pops up in a public space without the surrounding members knowing about it. So it's usually choreographed. And if you click on the link below, this is a great example of a flash mob from my favorite show, Modern Family. And this is where Mitchell goes and participates in his own flash mob, and it talks about the behind the scenes of preparing this scene within Modern Family. And if we're talking about international group days, one example is the International Pillow Fight. And this I saw on Facebook one time, and it's where everyone gathers at a certain place at a certain time and does a certain event or a certain act. And in this instance, it was a pillow fight. So I know if they create this event and it occurs again next year, it's not going to be the same because different people will participate, different pillows will be used, the pillows will be made out of different materials, and even the weather might be different. So that's what makes this ephemeral, is because from year to year, if it's an international day, it might change based on the elements. So can you think of any other forms of current happenings or ephemeral art that you see going around you today? And have you been involved in any of these before? And if you have, go ahead and write those responses down on your worksheet as well. So now you know what ephemeral means. You've learned what ephemeral art might mean. You've learned about a few examples of the different categories found within the ephemeral art movement or the ephemeral art style. And you've also learned about a few ephemeral artists, which we'll also learn about 2 more specific ones in the art history lesson coming up. And you've also learned about current or modern ephemeral art happenings that are going around in our society today. You've also learned how to reflect on whether or not you've seen ephemeral art around you, or if you've even been an ephemeral artist yourself. So now we'll begin our art history lesson about ephemeral art. If you exit out of this presentation and the audio, go up to the Art History tab, click on that, and we'll begin our next lesson in just a moment.